Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Temporal 3 podcast, where we talk all about fire alarm. I am joined by my co-host, Mr. Charles Olner. Hello, Charles.
Hello.
And Mr. Chris Godwin. Hello, Chris.
Hey, everyone.
Well, guys, today I'd like to start off with a customer story based on a recent experience that I had with a customer. Let me lay out the scenario for you. This large multinational corporation built some facilities. And in the facilities, it's a high security facility. So it's not something that's accessible to the general public, very sensitive stuff stored there, going on there. And obviously, the building required a fire alarm system. But the issue that they had is having the fire alarm system installed is one thing. Once they built out the property and put all their gear in there, now, for security purposes, they were unable to have the fire alarm company come in and do the inspection, testing, and maintenance of the fire alarm system due to security concerns. So, great, they're going to do it themselves. They have competent people working on their team. They really work to train their people to help them understand manufacturer training, everything else. Ran into a little roadblock. Turns out that the area that they were doing work, one of these state requirements is that technicians working on fire alarm systems hold NICET certification. This is where we come in. So we got a call from this organization, from some of the individuals running responsible for those locations, and said, hey, we need NICET certification. We kind of engaged a little bit further to determine what NICET certification they were looking for. And we set up a private class. We went to them, to their facility. Amazingly, I passed the security qualifications to get in. That's pretty surprising in itself. And we did a class for them, and we educated their team on how to pass the NICET exam. And I am very confident. I haven't heard back about the results of everybody, but I'm sure that everybody on their team, all the people in that class, all 20 of them, are going to become NICET certified, at least at level 1, probably higher, because we always encourage multiple levels of certification, and possibly even higher. And they're happy. They're very happy because now they can meet the AHJ requirements. They can maintain, inspect, and test the system themselves. And it worked out really, really well for them. So I thought that was an interesting story to share with the team. I'm sorry, Charles, go ahead.
Brian, one thing I want to point out, we may have helped them pass the NICET test, but the real thing that we did was we educated them on the requirements of the code to a higher level of competency.
Yes.
Sure, that's required to pass the NICET test, but the more important aspect of that is following the code keeps their buildings more safe than they otherwise would have been. So I think
Absolutely.
it's a really big deal that we provided that training for a company like this, and they're able to maintain that higher level of life safety in their building.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think, making the occupants more safe, reducing their risk in the building, being able to take it in-house, lots of advantages. And then for the technicians, better quality technicians. Now their technicians know even more about the code, can spot those issues, better do their work. And most important of all, NICET certifications attached to the individual. So now these technicians have an extra qualification, an extra acronym on the end of their name that makes them even more employable.
And the aspect that you brought up, the AHJ had this requirement. Some jurisdictions do have a NICET requirement to do fire alarm work. And, the best way to meet that is plan on going out and getting NICET certified. If
Absolutely.
we're working in this industry, it's such an important thing. It increases our marketability and our mobility in terms of what we do and where we do it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Great. Well, thanks for listening to my story, guys. Next thing I'd like to talk about is code. We're back into our favorite code, the code we live in, the code that we have to be familiar with cover to cover, and that is NFPA 72. And there's a section that I'd like to highlight today in Chapter 17, 17.4, which is general requirements for initiating devices. Chris, why don't you lead us off? Give us a requirement out of 17.4 for a general requirement that applies to all initiating devices covered in Chapter 17.
For starters, with the some of the things on installation, it gives us a little bit of the information for how it's to be installed. One of the things that oftentimes we kind of overlook as an installer or even just a regular old technician about any part of it is where's this going to be? Where's this device going to be installed? And there's a lot of factors that once we figure out where it's going to be installed need to be looked at. Is it going to be in a place where it could get damaged? Is it going to be installed in a way that it's protected from that damage? Are we going to have to go out and get additional protection? And 72 actually goes ahead and looks at these things and says, hey, if it's going to be in an area where there may be physical damage to it, you're going to have to protect it. A lot of times, depending on if we're going with some of your ceiling mounted devices or wall mounted devices, ceiling mount, sometimes if you've got beams or if you've got uh, more rather joists or anything, you'll have to make adjustments, but those joists might end up being the protection that gets the job done. Otherwise, you're getting covers. You're getting covers to put on to a lot of those devices. And you've got certain requirements when it comes to those covers.
Absolutely.
So, Chris, how does a technician know when a fire alarm device is in an area that's subject to physical damage? How do you know that?
What's it going to be used for? Not the device. What's the area going to be used for? So, example of that is a school gymnasium. You're going to have a school gymnasium? Cool. You're going to have, more likely than anything, you're going to have detection up there if you're trying to eliminate pull stations throughout. You got kids that are playing with basketballs, you got dodgeball, you got all this stuff that's going to be thrown around all over the place. Your stuff on the ceiling, although it's going to be unlikely, it may be subject to damage. Going to need
So,
protection.
just to get this straight, in the code it says school gymnasiums require protective covers over fire alarm devices.
No, in the IBC, it says that you can eliminate pull stations if you do automatic detection and one of the areas is in school gymnasiums. But with that thought process, from a possible design aspect going into the technician itself, we get a lot of, well, this could become an issue.
Whoa,
Code
whoa, whoa,
doesn't.
whoa, whoa. I'm starting to get a sense here of what you're describing.
Forward thinking.
And it sounds to me like you're saying fire alarm professionals are required to use common sense. Is Bryan, is that what the code requires?
Common sense is not very common.
I would
And
say
yeah, I mean, it's sometimes, hopefully the designer is aware and plans ahead. But yeah, sometimes it falls on the technician, and the technician looks in and says, you
this
really
could be
ought
a
to have
problem.
protection here. Yeah, this could be a problem. I see a potential problem.
Well, another requirement that you have listed, and this is in the code, which makes me wonder, why would someone have to put this in the code? Devices shall not be supported by wiring. Why is that in the code?
First of all, have you ever seen that, Charles?
Yes.
Chris, have you seen that?
I have had some buildings that we went in to do stuff on, do some inspection and test. Look up, and the smoke detector is hanging down by just wire. I'm not. What's up with this? You're not supposed to do that.
Yep.
Well, that's how they did it. I've seen it.
Yep.
Absolutely.
So why not? Well, the purpose of wire is to provide power and circuit to the device, not support to the device. And not to say that a smoke detector is so heavy that it's going to break an 18 gauge cable, but that's not the intent.
Well, the problem, Bryan, is somebody had to write that in the code and make that a code requirement. Isn't that
because it because it
obvious?
because it happened. Yes.
Not once, not twice, regularly.
Yes, absolutely. So that support independent of the conductors is an important one. I want to go back to what Chris was talking about for covers, because that's one that's particularly interesting, that covers have to be listed for use with the device. So Chris, that application, gymnasium application, let's say, where they put those covers over the smoke detectors. So what I'm reading here, what I understand from the code is that those smoke detector covers have to be listed with the smoke detector. Why would that be? What could a cover do to a smoke detector?
Nothing. It'll protect it and, give it hugs and
Well,
kisses
depending on
for
what it is, it could
emotional
prevent
support.
smoke
But
from entering the chamber.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's the big thing with automatic devices is that they need to be able to get their fire signature. And if we are protecting the device, but blocking it off from a way for it to get its signature, whether it's smoke or heat or whatever it may be, it's not going to be able to do its job. And that's why it's so important that with a lot of your automatic devices, your covers are listed for use with the device so that there is still a way for that fire signature to get to the device.
So, Brian, the question that comes up, does a specific cover have to be listed for a specific model and manufacturer of a smoke detector?
Yes.
Or can I have a cover that's listed for use with smoke detectors and that's good enough?
Covers shall be listed with the device. So
With the
not any device.
specific manufacturer and
Yes.
model.
Yes, exactly. And that's what it's implying there, that with the device, not with any device, or covers shall be. If it just said covers shall be listed, great. They just have to be listed. Has to be listed with the device. So if you go on the smoke detector cover manufacturer website, look at the data sheet, you will see a list of detectors that that cover is listed with. And another one that I find interesting is pull station covers, because pull station covers have to be listed with the device. That you can't just buy a generic cover and say, all right, I'm going to use it with this pull station. It has to be listed with it. And pull stations are not automatic, they're manual. They do require some level of that word that we used before, common sense, to be able to lift the cover and pull the pull station. But a common misconception with pull station covers is that you can't use them with dual action because it makes them triple action.
It's
That
a
is not the
lie.
case. It's a lie. Yes. Common misconception. It's a lie. It's a trap. It's a common misconception. You actually can use a cover on a dual action pull station. Now, Chris, there is a going a little off topic here, but there is a pull station requirement regarding sounders that's in the IBC that's not addressed in 72. You want to talk about that?
Your protective covers for pull stations that have the sounders. If you are going to be using those, you have to get AHJ approval. Now, like you said, Brian, this coming out of the IBC. The IBC has this in 907.4. It's not in 72, however. And the 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 thought that I have with the why on this is what's the whole purpose of that sounder? It's to prevent false alarms. As soon as you lift it up, the sounder goes off and people think immediately the fire alarm's been activated. Well, that's a double-edged sword. It stops people from causing false alarms because, they lift it up and they think, haha, I did it. I can, I'm the hero of the school. I get to, do the thing and now everybody thinks I'm super cool. On the flip side of it, in the event of an actual fire emergency, someone's going to go lift that up and they're going to think to themselves they activated the fire alarm system and have that same, I'm the hero, I did it, when really nothing's happened. So what I what ends up happening a lot of times out in the field when we have those, you got to get AHJ approval. There's additional training for staff on how to operate the device, or there's additional signage on how to operate the device as well. And again, it all comes down to what those covers are actually there to do. They're to prevent false alarm.
I think sometimes we get caught up in being fire alarm professionals and say, well, it's pretty obvious, and it is labeled on the cover, lift cover pull station. But you got to remember, common sense isn't very common, and sometimes people don't think that. They, in a panic situation, they lift the cover, it goes beep 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 beep. Okay, I've activated the fire alarm. Well, no, actually you haven't. Well, guys, next thing I'd like to talk about, question from the field, is about projected beam smoke detectors. Charles, where do we see projected beam smoke detectors commonly used?
warehouses is a good example of where you might see those.
Chris, where have you seen them?
Outside of warehouses, going back to school gymnasiums. School gymnasiums, they like to use them. School gyms are big, and your beam detectors have a big coverage area.
Chris, you're really focused on schools. School
Yeah,
gymnasiums,
you
schools for
do.
pull stations, schools for beam detectors.
You see schools have special requirements in certain things, certain perspectives. So, plus, I mean, you do a lot of work on schools. Schools need to be protected, and that's where we see a lot of contracts coming from. So,
Yep,
There are
other
absolutely.
places
also
too, but yeah,
areas there are also areas where spot type smoke detectors may be difficult to install. And
atriums.
beam type detectors are used in those situations as well.
Was going to be my application. Chris and I have been in a lot of embassy suites, and that what's a big thing for the atriums? Projected beam detectors in the embassy suites. Anytime you have an atrium, that's a common method of detection because you're talking about, a 10, 15-story building. Imagine getting a lift, and every time you have to service the detectors, that's a heck of a reach. You can't get a big extension ladder for that. Projected beam, mount them on the sidewalls, provide the coverage. So how do we install projected beam detectors? What kind of spacing do we use for them?
Depends.
Depends.
Manufacturer. Depends on what the manufacturer says.
Yeah,
Um,
typically it's 60 feet, Brian.
Typically 60, but the code specifically says manufacturer's instructions. So yeah,
And
I
does
mean,
that apply only to beam detectors, or do manufacturer's instructions apply to every single device that we install?
manufacturer's instructions apply to everything. So
Absolutely.
yeah, some guidance is 60 feet in between beam paths. So not between transmitter receiver, but between beam paths. And the length between transmitter, receiver, transceiver, and reflector can be up to 330 feet. There are shorter range ones like 165 footers and stuff like that, but they still allow that 60 feet between beam paths. But you're right, Charles. It all goes back to manufacturer's instructions because who knows best about a product? Manufacturer. They built it, they listed it, they understand the application of it. What if they're sidewall mounted? Ceiling mounted. I'm sorry, Chris. What if they're ceiling mounted? Is there something in NFPA 72 that talks about? Because usually they're wall mounted, but they do permit ceiling mounted. Is there a special provision for that?
well, with your beam detectors, they need a stable surface or stable surface, and if we can't provide that with the wall, you are permitted to do suspended ceiling. With that, you have to be a quarter of the distance of the detector off of the sidewall. So if we're using 60 feet, that means 15, which means just like spot type, how far off the wall you got to be. But that is if we're using 60-foot spacing, it's 15 feet. What the code looks at is you have to be a quarter of the full spacing off the sidewall.
Let's be specific here because the detector spacing is 330 feet between reflector and transceiver.
Right.
It's not a quarter of that. It's a quarter of the spacing between beam paths, which is typically 60 feet. That's where Chris came up with 15. So yeah, that is a permitted application. And where would we find that, Chris?
The application or where in the code?
Where the code requirement is, where it talks about
Um,
it.
Annex A, Annex
Yep,
A with this, Annex A with when it comes to beam detectors, Annex A is where you're going to find a lot of what you need to know about them.
absolutely.
Which is a double-edged sword of it's in there. Is your AHJ going to accept it because it's Annex A materials though?
Remains to be seen. You can
Yeah,
always show them the instructions.
yeah, it is. Yeah, you can always do that. They might not be too thrilled either way.
Absolutely.
Well, and I think you're making an assumption that the AHJ actually knows that Annex A material is different than code material. I'm not sure
Yes,
that they all do.
you're
What
right
uh
about that.
what I have encountered is they don't typically like Annex A material because it's explanations and recommendations. Sure, it's a recommendation to do that, but we want it done this way. Is how I've seen a lot of the reaction with it.
You've had access to higher level AHJs than I do. Most of them just say, it's in the code.
My HJ always says, I was paid to lead, not to read. All right, guys. Well, I want to thank you again for an interesting and enlightening conversation. I want to ask our listeners out there to please subscribe and support this channel. And we'll see you all next time. Thanks again, Charles. Thanks again, Chris.